Al Jazeera International Academy. We're using the Headway books, and this is for the upper intermediate students. And reading and speaking. Diana and Elvis shot JFK. What do you think that means, that headline, Mr. Liu?
Maybe Princess Diana and the pop/rock singer Elvis Presley shot former President John F. Kennedy.
Yes, and obviously it's kind of said in tongue-in-cheek. Tongue-in-cheek means when you're not really being serious, it's a bit of a joke, actually. So, what do you know about the following events? Mr. Liu, what do you know about the death of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy?
Allegedly, Lee Harvey Oswald was hiding in a building in Texas, and he used a rifle to shoot John F. Kennedy while he was riding in a convertible.
Okay, and when you say allegedly, do you think he did it?
Well, all indications, including several different investigations, have found that he did it, but there were some conspiracy theories about maybe there being a second gunman who wasn't caught. So, that wasn't fair, I really can't say.
Okay, so Lee Harvey Oswald was convicted of the murder of, or the assassination of JFK. What about John Lennon? What do you know about the death of, well, the murder of John Lennon?
I believe he was also shot. I think there was a shooter who had some kind of mental disorder. He didn't feel like he was a very important person, and then he thought that if he shot John Lennon, he would be an important person for doing that.
Mm.
I don't really remember the whole story. I'm not a big John Lennon fan.
Yes. Okay. What about Elvis Presley? What do you know about the death of Elvis Presley?
Elvis Presley, I'm not sure I know a lot about his death either. I don't think that was a shooting. I thought maybe he had like some kind of drug overdose or something.
Yeah.
Or yeah, I know that he was having problems with alcoholism and drugs later in life, and problems with not performing as well as he used to perform. So I don't know if it was a drug overdose because of those kinds of issues or what.
Yeah. And what about Princess Diana? What do you know about the death of Princess Diana?
Princess Diana, I think she died in a car crash. And from what I heard, her chauffeur was drinking heavily. He was supposedly drunk, and then I think there were paparazzi who were following her limousine, and then she wanted to get away from the paparazzi, so her chauffeur was drunk, and at the same time he was also driving faster than he should be. I think he drove into a tunnel, and he crashed the car, and then she died in the crash. I think that's what happened.
Yeah, and it turned out that the driver, they don't believe that he was drinking, actually.
Oh, okay.
And there was talk of his blood samples had been switched at the hospital. And then there were all these conspiracy theories.
Okay.
But I don't believe that he was drunk anyway, because if you're driving, if you're a professional driver, you don't drink anyway. And well, most of the drivers I've ever met, none of them drank. I've met a lot. But in France, there is a drinking culture where they like to have a glass of wine, and it's possible that he did have a glass of wine, or maybe even two. That wouldn't be unusual, and it would be easy for somebody to slip something into the drink. But personally, I don't believe that Henri Paul, the driver, was actually drunk. I don't believe it, not for 1 second. There is the Apollo moon landings. What do you know about those?
I'm going to see. If they're moon landings, then I'm guessing it was the first, so it was Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong. They made a moon landing, and they put a plaque on the moon. They made a famous statement, "This is one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." They collected specimens of the matter that was on the moon, brought them back to Earth for scientific studies. I think there was an Apollo issue where I think they ran out of fuel or they were having a problem with the spacecraft. And they had to do a lot of different kinds of creative measures to be able to get back to Earth safely. They weren't able to make it. So, off the top of my head, that's what I remember about those moon landing stories.
Okay. You know, I was just about to go like this. I was just about to go like that. Oh, look at that. It works. Oh, I'm impressed with that. So what can you tell me about this photograph?
That looks like the famous photograph of JFK when, or before, he was shot in the head, allegedly by Lee Harvey Oswald. That was a motorcade that was in Texas. And Lee Harvey Oswald was allegedly a sniper in a window of one of the buildings that was near to where this motorcade was going by.
Yeah, from my perspective, I believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was involved in this to some degree, but I don't know what. But the indications are, from all the medical reports, that there was more than one shooter. And because he was hit from different angles,
Right.
and one of the bullets actually went through JFK, and it hit the same bullet hit the bodyguard as well. So he was also injured. And they did experiments to see, and they came to the conclusion that there was most likely another shooter, or maybe more, we don't know. But I still believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was involved to some degree, but I don't know what.
He was killed by Jack Ruby in jail.
Yeah, that's to keep him quiet, yeah.
Yeah, Jack Ruby was some kind of a organized crime.
Yeah, he was a nightclub owner, and he was suffering from cancer.
Okay.
He only had a few months to live himself.
Okay.
Suddenly, he turns out to be the one who shoots the alleged assassin, which is very, very strange.
But I think he was also some kind of criminal or something.
Yeah, he was, yeah. He was a criminal, yeah.
Oh, I've heard some strange stories about this, like when I listen to a recording, you hear multiple gunshots, and someone was saying that Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to shoot John F. Kennedy, and then someone else was supposed to kill Lee Harvey Oswald.
Well, that's what happened, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, immediately after, not later on when Jack Ruby. There were like forensic studies that said something like a bullet entered Kennedy's head and then it stayed inside his head for a few seconds, then flew out, and people were saying it's impossible, or
Yeah, it is
just great
impossible.
stories
Yeah.
about how the forensic looked.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So there are many conspiracy theories about these events. What are conspiracy theories, Mr. Liu?
so conspiracy theory is the idea that when there's a crime or a major event, like a famous person's death, that there's a lot going on behind the scenes, that there are a lot of different kinds of people who are involved who don't want to look involved, that maybe all the blame is being put on just one person or one really simple explanation when there's much more going on.
Yeah. How are they usually circulated?
Well, I think a lot of them are internet rumors now, right? I mean, somebody might post something on the internet, on Facebook or on Twitter, and then someone else tweets it and follows it, and other people talk about it in emails, and then maybe it makes its way onto letters to the editor and op-ed pages, and maybe you would have even a newspaper journalist saying there is a theory that this is what happened, but it's not substantiated, or an uncited source or a source who wishes to remain nameless said this about it, and then it becomes a bigger and bigger story.
Mm-hmm. And what events have we just spoken about?
We've been speaking about the JFK murder. We talked about Elvis Presley and Princess Diana.
Why do you think people like these theories?
I think people just are interested in honesty and dishonesty. When dishonest things are going on, I think people try to develop explanations about why dishonest things are going on and how they look. I think a lot of people, especially in America, distrust the government. And so a lot of American people like to blame the government for problems. I think a lot of people think that they're criminals who work in policing agencies and federal agents, and that they're getting the government involved in things where it shouldn't be involved in. I just think people like to come up with theories, explanations for major events happening the way they happen.
Okay, nice. So the conspiracy theory regarding President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, he was also known as Jack Kennedy, amongst his closer inner circle, is quite alarming, actually, because at that time, President Kennedy was told not to go to Dallas, where this fateful shooting took place, because he was not popular in the South. And they said, you should not go there, you have a lot of enemies there. But he insisted on going, but not only that, he insisted on going in an open-topped car where he could see the people, where the people could see him. It was almost as if he was bringing death to himself. It was a very strange day. The indications are that President Kennedy was shot more than once. He was shot by more than one shooter. These are the indications. We don't know if it's true or not. The man arrested was Lee Harvey Oswald, and shortly after his arrest, it was a couple of days or something, he was actually shot dead himself by Jack Ruby, who was a nightclub owner and a known, well, they say he was a criminal. Well, I suppose he must have been involved in something. Well, he shot the president's so-called assassin. And this makes you wonder, it makes you think, well, why would he do that, if not to keep this man quiet, to stop him from talking? Then we had this story that Jack Ruby himself was actually dying from some form of incurable cancer. So there are a lot of questions, even today, that have remained unanswered, and where the person who shot Kennedy actually shot him from, or if there was more than one, two, or even three or four, or even more than that, who were lying in wait for the president. Even to this day, we don't know. President Kennedy's late widow, Jacqueline Onassis, she blamed Lyndon B. Johnson. She actually openly said that she felt that Lyndon B. Johnson was the man responsible for President Kennedy's death. Who knows? It's one of those conspiracy theories. Then we had the other conspiracy theory. Which one was it? Let me see. Let me just go back. Then we had the conspiracy theory about John Lennon. John Lennon was a famous pop star in the 1960s. He was a lead singer with the Beatles, one of the most famous pop groups in the world in the 1960s. There were three other members of the band. Paul McCartney, who John Lennon kind of partnered up with in writing songs and composing music. And there was a guitarist, George Harrison, who sadly is no longer with us. And on the drums, there was Ringo Starr. The most famous two members of the band were Paul McCartney and John Lennon. When the band decided to split up and go their separate ways, John Lennon decided to move to New York in the United States. Oh, by the way, the band, they're English, they're from Liverpool. But John Lennon decided to move to America after the band split. And he went there to live there with his second wife, Yoko Ono. Whilst in America, he found peace of mind. He said that people didn't bother him in the street. Occasionally someone might say, "All right, John, how's it going, John?" But for the most part, people didn't recognize him. He was allowed to walk around freely. Whereas in England, he tended to be mobbed by fans of the Beatles. So he was quite happy living in New York. And one day, a man came up to him in the street and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Lennon, can I have your autograph?" That's when they signed their names. And John Lennon said, "Yeah, sure." He signed it. He said, "Thank you, Mr. Lennon." And then as John Lennon went to walk off, the man then again said, "Mr. Lennon." And as John Lennon turned round to face him, the man shot him dead in the street. And it was outside his own apartment. And I can't say that this was a conspiracy theory, because Mark Chapman, the man who shot John Lennon, was actually mentally disturbed. His reason for killing John Lennon was that he felt that he himself was a nobody, that he had nothing in the world, and the likes of John Lennon had everything. And he felt that because of John Lennon's popularity, not just in England, but in America too, that if he shot John Lennon and killed him, then he would become the famous person. Then he would have the limelight. The limelight is all the attention. Then we look at another conspiracy theory. This time, Elvis Presley. Perhaps I should leave that there whilst I'm doing that. Elvis Presley, he was a very, very famous pop singer, pop star in the 1950s, 60s and 70s. And in the 1980s, he became extremely famous. By this time he made films, and he was someone who people liked. They liked him a lot. Everyone was buying his songs, his records, and he made millions. He was very, very famous, as famous as the Beatles. And he was from America. And even today, people do Elvis Presley impersonations, and they have Elvis nights where people dress up as Elvis Presley and they sing Elvis songs. So even today, he has this cult following, even though he's been dead since the 1980s. And what happened with Elvis was that people said that his career was going downhill. And he was upset by this. And he would appear at places like Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. Yeah, Las Vegas. This was like one of the biggest venues. And the thing about Elvis was that he would always make comebacks. He would come back. And people would then say, well, he's not finished. He's really good. He's always been good. And like me, he put on a bit of weight over the years. And the problem was Elvis, I feel Elvis was depressed at certain times in his life. I think his frame of mind would go up and down, up and down. There were stories of him having lots of TVs in his hotel room, and he would put different channels on, and the ones that were talking about him in a negative way, he would shoot the TV screen. Now this is not the behaviour of somebody who is mentally balanced. So I think he had a lot of things troubled him, and he died from a drug overdose. He became very bloated on stage. His face was out here. He was really big, and then they said he died of an overdose. And he was like John Lennon, he was in his 40s, early 40s. I think he might have been 40 or 42. I think one of them was 40 and one of them was 42. A very, very young age that they died. Very tragic. Was there a conspiracy behind Elvis Presley's death? I don't think so. There are stories that he was never killed, that he never died, that it was a staged event. That was the conspiracy. I don't believe it. Then, of course, there's a conspiracy theory about Princess Diana, the beautiful Princess Diana, who became known as the Queen of Hearts. They say that Princess Diana, who was at that time seeing Jodie Fayed, they say that they didn't want Princess Diana to become pregnant with a baby by Dodi Fayed. I'm not saying she was pregnant. There's no evidence to suggest she was. But they didn't want this situation to occur in any event. Primarily because Dodi Fayed, obviously, from the Middle East, a Muslim. If he had a son or a daughter, they would be Muslims. And the British establishment certainly didn't want that. And we all know that Diana fell out of favour with her own family, as well as the establishment, because she was outspoken. Then there were more conspiracies. She was involved in the clearing of landmines in parts of, I believe, Africa. And the conspiracy theory here is that the British establishment was selling the landmines. They were making billions from these arms sales. And I remember one documentary on television saying that one of these lords had, or some sort of aristocrat, he'd phoned her up and warned her not to meddle in things she didn't know anything about. But again, it's a conspiracy theory. All of these things, they are theories. We don't know the truth. What we do know is that President Kennedy was assassinated, and Elvis Presley died from a drug overdose, and John Lennon was murdered by somebody who was mentally unstable at the time, and that Princess Diana died in a car crash. Those are the facts. Conspiracy theories, well, we could, the more if we looked at it, the more we would come up with different reasons why it was a conspiracy. Because conspiracies can develop out of nothing. And then at the end of the day, we find out that we were wrong. We had a case in Britain, Hanratty. He was widely believed to be innocent of a murder. Everybody believed he was innocent. And he was hanged. And shortly after his hanging, and those of a couple of other people too, they banned hanging in Britain. They abolished hanging by the neck hanging, because they felt that innocent people were being hanged. Years later, DNA from James Hanratty proved that he was in fact guilty of this particular crime in England. So before we start jumping on the bandwagon and saying all of these incidents were conspiracies, institutional conspiracies, governmental conspiracies, just take a step back. What are the facts? Not the theories, the facts. Then we might start to get somewhere. The final one, the Apollo moon landings, which I have to say amuses me greatly. There are those people out there who say the moon landings were fake, that the astronauts never actually went to the moon, and that the Americans faked everything. I just find that conspiracy theory to be the most unbelievable of the lot, and I'm not even going to go there. Of course they went to the moon. So here we're going to look at some vocabulary work. Okay. About Diana, Princess of Wales. Everybody calls her Lady Diana. She was actually Princess Diana, not Lady Diana. Before she married Prince Charles, yes, she was a lady. But she became Princess Diana, member of the British royal family. So Princess Diana, what do we know? The huge number of websites about Princess Diana, conspiracy theories, is absolutely amazing. The florists devised a clever but wicked plot to murder Diana. These are all conspiracies. The car crash was a carefully planned trick. That's all it is. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely is definitely. Definitely. There can be no question about it. Amazing. Fantastic. Devised. This is to come up with, to think about something like and make a plan of action, an action plan. Clever. In Britain, clever means intelligent. In America, clever means like devious, cunning. It means intelligent, but in a way that you use it to your personal advantage. Wicked, evil, like a witch, nasty, horrible, wicked. Plot, that's the scenario, the situation, the whole idea of the situation, the plot to do something wicked. Murder, to kill, destroy. The car crash was a carefully planned trick. Carefully planned. It took a lot of planning. They say that the paparazzi were involved, only to find out later that the paparazzi were not involved in this. But there are lots of other factors. I don't believe any of these theories. Believe is what you look at, you think about, and you say, yes, that's right, or no, that's not right. It's what you believe. Someone in the royal family devised a plot to interfere with the brakes. To interfere with the brakes. To put some grease on the brakes so that when driver Henri Paul put his foot on the brake, the car didn't stop. Conspiracy theories. Moon landing. Let's have a look at that. Rumours have been going around for many years. Going round from person to person to person. Oh, this happened, he did this, he did that. Rumour. It's called the rumour mill. It goes around and around. The US flag is seen blowing and there is no wind on the moon. Blowing. Well, I suppose, you know, a little bit of cloth and there might not be wind. There might be some form of gravity there. There might be some kind of atmosphere there. Don't forget, those flags are made of cloth. They could easily, don't forget, they had a very primitive Apollo craft by today's standards. And I'm sure there must be some kind of air being emitted from that craft. Conspiracy theories. A fantastic exhibition of stars. Fantastic? Oh, amazing, wonderful. Exhibition. Well, an exhibition in this sense means what you see. And they saw all of these beautiful stars beyond the moon. Beautiful. That's what they would call it. It's an exhibition, a display. An exhibition is a display of stars. Scientists have all agreed that the theorists don't have any argument at all. They don't have any argument. They are not able to argue their point because they have no real, genuine evidence. The facts are: Princess Diana died in a car crash. John Lennon was murdered. Elvis Presley took a drug overdose. These are facts. We should really, in all of these cases, keep to the facts. We know that Lee Harvey Oswald was a member of the Communist Party. These are facts. NASA has been desperately trying to hide evidence of life. Trying to hide. In other words, there are those that say, yes, there's alien life out there. Most probably there is. We have billions of galaxies and billions of stars, billions of planets and billions of galaxies just like our own. So, of course, it's natural to believe there's life beyond the Earth. But they're saying that NASA has been trying to hide the evidence. They just say, no, 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 it's only us. We're the only ones. There's nothing out there. JFK Jr. There are many strange theories. One of the craziest claims, he was murdered by Clinton supporters. Here's the vocabulary. Craziest claims. When people say the most unbelievable things, bordering on the stupidity, I suppose. Explosives were stuck to the tail of the plane. I should point out that JFK Jr. died in a plane crash. This was the son of the late president. His son was the editor of a magazine, I think it was called George, I think, after George Washington. And his plane came down in Martha's Vineyard in the United States. And he was also very young. I think he was in his 40s. The plane came down. People were saying, oh yes, Bill Clinton's supporters, they killed him, they murdered him. Come on. Stick to the facts. Here we have the plane hit violent air movements. So the plane's coming along, suddenly it hit violent air movements. Boom! I find that difficult to believe, that the plane would come down like that. I find that very difficult to believe. The crash happened strangely and coincidentally on the 30th anniversary of the president's death, I think that means. Well, that is strange. Some explanations are clearly stupid. Absolutely. But others are quite believable. For me, the one about President Kennedy. I think it's quite likely there was more than one shooter. But I don't think we will ever know. Certainly not in my lifetime, anyway. So that brings me to the end of this first part of this interesting topic on conspiracy theories. I hope that's given you food for thought. I hope that's given you something to think about. Thank you.